So today we're going to look at the 7-step framework for yoga mastery, and I like to think of this as the entire roadmap. Not many people see their yoga practice like this as, something that can tap into this battle of energy that we have and then actually utilize it. So the way I've visualized this analogy is that imagine whatever is in this barrel as raw energy, like maybe some days you have low energy, some days you have high energy, but imagine whatever is in this barrel as just raw energy. And then imagine what's coming out on this other side, this water that's dripping from the tap, as kind of the clean, pure water that you can use for the rest of your life, like actually to be more productive at work, to be better in your relationships, to feel healthier. And so it's about taking this raw energy that exists within all of us and kind of putting it through this 7-step process and making clear, drinkable water. It's how to convert raw energy into something useful. And that's what the 7-step framework is. So the first step is actually just to unlock your mind's map. So this is like building the foundation. The second step is to be able to kind of create this consistent practice through following a guided video. And then the next one is to build your independent container by being able to practice on your own. And then you have to be able to resolve all those stuck points, all the things that actually hold you back in the practice. And then you're able to kind of refine the poses, see how, these subtle corrections lead to deeper awareness. And then you see how repetition over a long period of time creates this uninterrupted calm. And then finally, we have to be able to witness the ripple effects in our daily life and see how this spills over into our work, our family, and the rest of our decisions. Now, the reason I use this analogy is because if we have a bottleneck or if we have a problem in any one of these little sections of the pipe, then the water, the energy won't be able to flow through all the way until you can actually drink it. And so what we'll do today is we're going to try and see where are you stuck and then give you some solutions and see how the program as well can help you feel unstuck and move this prana through all the way until it's useful. So keep this visual in your mind as we go through the rest. I want you just to see this as how can I get unstuck and allow this prana, this energy to flow through all of these different sections of the pipe. So the first step is just to unlock your mind's map. So the very first step is just about understanding why you're practicing. And so many of us just simply jump into a practice because, we want to do a handstand or we want to be able to do a back bend or we just feel like, your mother said it was good for you and you have to do it. So we don't have a personal why. So today what we're going to look at is how can we build that blueprint before we actually expect your body to go into any of the advanced asanas. And this is where we engage with the core foundations. Now, before you even start to move, you've got to understand the philosophy, like what is underlying this practice? Why am I doing this practice? And then using breath, drishti, and asana, using these 3 tools, we then create these 3 pillars. We set this foundation so that whatever we build on top of it is strong, is sturdy. Now, even on a daily basis, we shouldn't just jump into an asana practice without attending to these 3 things, without regulating the breath, without working with our drishti, and without kind of sitting nice and tall, working on our posture, and feeling the state of the asana before we expect it to move. So step 1 is just about setting your foundation, giving your mind an understanding of why you're doing this practice in particular, and then actually working with some foundational techniques, the Trishtana method. Now let's look at the common problems that arise and the solutions that we've made for this. The first one is impatience and a lack of time. Most people think that sitting down and learning things or doing theory is just a waste of time. This is, after all, a yoga program, so they just want to practice. And sometimes, they'll be like, okay, while I'm cooking, I'm just going to play this in the background and then, continue this. Or maybe it's just you're still cleaning up your room, you're still making sure everything is ready, and you're just like, okay, let me quickly, do the drishti practice really, really quickly without actually using that as a way to regulate and come into the practice. And a lot of us that have busy minds are impatient and don't have a lot of time. So I completely understand that. But what we've done is we've broken down this complex information, this thing that's integrated into the sequence, into digestible, actionable parts. So you never have to think like, oh my gosh, like on any given day, you never have to think, do I have to go and find another meditation that I have to do before I practice? You just sit for the practice, and most times we will do a breath work, a drishti practice, as well as some spinal movements, just to get all these three bases covered. Now, another big problem that I notice is restlessness, and this is the inability to just sit quietly, especially as people who struggle with, sitting down quietly. I think just sitting as soon as we start is very difficult because the mind tends to kind of dissociate and go into, whatever else needs to be done. And there's an impatience to get to actually practicing. So the body will become restless and fidgety. But I think we have to remind ourselves of why we're doing this yoga practice in the first place, as opposed to anything else that we could do with our time. And Patanjali's Yoga Sutra basically says yogas chitta vritti nirodha, which means yoga is this whole range of techniques to actually help us still the fluctuations of the mind. And so if you have a restless mind, putting it through this process, through this framework, is what will help you create these mind stilling benefits. But if you don't go through the restlessness, or you kind of just tune out and fidget or walk away or just go into the practice immediately, you might not experience the mind stilling benefits. So even though it's difficult, I encourage you to begin with the foundations always and then go into the asana practice. And then the next one is skepticism, which is, how does this theory help? It doesn't really address my hip problem or my shoulder pain. And I think we need to reframe what this actually means. This is not like me forcing you to listen to a long lecture. It's more like to understand what can actually prepare a mind that's active to learn, to absorb, to embody these principles, rather than just, bland theory that we need to do because we're in school. So understanding that the theory is part of the preparation is also really important. And so we don't feel this once we kind of realize, once we dive into the modules and we see, oh, okay, this is what each of these modules are supposed to unlock in me. So it's not just me passively learning something. I'm actually going to be training my mind through paying attention even to the theory. The next one is overwhelm. We all get overwhelmed with new Sanskrit terms, new names of asanas, and just feeling like it's a lot, especially when you look at a manual with all this, these words, you might think, oh my God, that's a lot to learn at once. So if you feel overwhelmed just as you start, it's completely understandable. But we offer short video segments. So sometimes, you don't even have to do a whole hour-long practice. If you just have 15 minutes, you can very well do a drills video. You can also just look at the worksheets that break it down for you and say, okay, this is what you need to digest first, and then you need to digest this. So it's very much in a format that helps you feel less overwhelmed. And also you don't have to think, you just open up the course, do a single video, and you're done. So whenever that feeling of overwhelm comes up, try and give yourself a simple task. Open up a video and just do that video so that you don't feel like, oh my God, I have to figure out everything. And then the last thing is, before we start our practice, is just to have, we don't have a quiet space. Maybe we have a loud family, or we don't have a yoga room in our house. That's, one of the things that we have to overcome if we want to make this a part of our lives and we want to have a home practice. So we need to kind of take certain steps before we step on the mat, like cleaning the room, cleaning the space, cleaning your mat, making sure that you have this checklist of things that you do so that you actually feel like, oh, this is a conducive environment for me to practice, and then I can just slip into the practice. So these are kind of the the problems that arise when you first try and lay the foundations, and some ideas or solutions that you can implement in order to give your mind this sense that, okay, it's okay. I just need to get in, start the practice, and then things will take care of themselves. The next step is to forge a consistent practice. Now, by consistent practice, I don't mean like you need to be practicing 4 or 5 times a week. I just mean like you're able to step on the mat at least once a week, twice a week, and you're using like a guided video to practice. So it feels less intimidating. You're not expecting yourself to just do self-practice right off the bat, but you have this map, you have someone taking you through the steps, and obviously the recorded classes help in this way because you don't have to think, someone else is guiding you, and you can just flow into the postures. Now, the cool thing about Ashtanga is that it's a moving meditation, and as you begin to kind of just implement this sequence in the order that it's presented, your mind will become more and more engaged. And because we're not varying it too much, it gives the mind this kind of container so that it can just say, okay, all I need to do for this stage of my practice is I need to follow some videos. I don't need to think about doing anything. I just need to blindly listen, and my body is going to do what the teacher is doing on the screen. Yeah, so it gives your mind a single job to do so that it doesn't wander off. Now, the second stage is really crucial because this is where you're actually putting the first layer of bricks on top of that foundation of a prepared mind. And now a lot of people get stuck here and think, wow, I just need to be guided through a class at all times, and I won't be able to even practice on my own if I don't go to a studio or if I don't have a teacher. And I think for us as practitioners, it's important to remember that this is just the first layer. This is just laying the foundation of knowing what pace to practice at, knowing the names of the poses, knowing what comes next, and learning the sequence with its names and how to go in and go out. But this is an important step because as you keep adding more positions, you see you always need to come back to this stage. Like you always need to be doing led classes or guided classes so that you understand pacing, so that you understand like, okay, if someone else is guiding me, how do I get in and get out of the shape? So this is a very, very important step. Even if you've been practicing for a year, you'll still need to add in some of these into your practice where someone else is guiding you. Huh? But let's look at some of the common problems that arise when we try to do this. The first one is distraction and a lack of focus. So I hear this a lot from my students is that we can't follow long videos. If a video is like over an hour long, then my mind wanders. I get up, I go check my phone, and that's it. My practice is done. I roll up my mat and I have to move on with my day. And I think with this, the important thing is to realize on any given day, you need not do a whole hour-long practice or an hour and a half long practice. You can choose to do a 20-minute one. You can choose to do 10 minutes if you want to. And it really depends how much energy and time do you have on that particular day, and then you can choose, okay, on this day I can do a sequence that's a little bit longer or a little bit shorter. But remember, you're still choosing to watch a video and be guided through the sequence, and ideally you're going in that sequential order. But on some days, you can go back to the first thing that you did, but you have a cap until which you can work with, and anything below that is acceptable, or anything like maybe one sequence above that is also fine. So just remember that if you're feeling like distracted or you're feeling like I need to check my phone and get up, keep your environment like in such a state that you don't get distracted, and choose a practice that is suitable for your attention span and your energy level on that given day. The second big problem that arises is that sometimes a guided class can be too fast or too slow, especially when I'm guiding you and there's a class of varied levels. I usually try and see like, what is the lowest common denominator that everyone can follow? So maybe I'm a little slower, maybe I'm a little bit like faster on some days if most of the class is more advanced. And I can never truly match the pace that you need to go at. But you need to realize that if you start small, if you just begin from the foundations, you'll slowly start to build the stamina, and you can adapt the practice over time. Like even if you do a led class where the rest of the class is doing the whole series, you'll be able to just kind of do until what you can and then just do the closing sequence and leave. So just remember, the pacing of a teacher need not be your pacing. It just has to be that is the standard of 5-count breath. That is how one would usually breathe and move. But if you need a slower, softer pace, that's also totally fine. Number 3 is overwhelm. And this, all of us feel this all the time, this analysis paralysis, where, if you open up YouTube or you open up like any of these apps, then you say, okay, what do I need to do this morning? Maybe, I need to do something because I'm having pain in my hips. Maybe you should find a 15-minute video that just does yoga for like hips. And so this can itself be a distraction and can take you out of actually progressing in the sequence. And that's why within our framework, we only introduce 3 to 5 new poses within each sequence. We don't overwhelm you so that you actually work on those 3 to 5 poses only. And then once you master that and once you can do that sequence from memory, you can then move on to the next one. So basically, just remember, if you feel overwhelmed, don't go on YouTube, don't open up an app. Just do one sequence, pick that sequence and do it fully. Yeah. The next one is self-doubt, or like just this feeling of, oh my gosh, am I doing this right? Should I be looking around to see if, I'm matching the rest of the room? And you're also afraid of doing things wrong, because when you're practicing online, you can obviously feel like, the teacher isn't watching me directly. I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know if this is for me. But keep in mind that the live classes are literally there so that I can support you and I can see in real time like where you're going wrong. And I can see quite a lot over the screen, even though like it seems like I can't. I can generally tell if you're doing something that's gonna cause you an injury. So you don't have to worry about if you're doing it right or doing it wrong. Just make sure that you come to the live classes, because that's where I can give you feedback and refine your practice. If you don't come to the live classes, then you've got to do at least one private session once a month or something like that, so that I can see you and give you feedback. And I think just practicing with guided classes without this loop of feedback is kind of like a recipe for disaster, because you could be creating habits that aren't conducive to growth, aren't conducive to actually progressing in your practice. So just remember, use the live classes, come as often as you can, and get feedback. And finally, it's this boredom of repeating the same exact classes. I've kind of condensed it down to absolutely just what you need. And though I've been tempted to add in more classes and add in more variations, I've actually tried to strip away all of the classes that are not necessary, so that it can actually just train your mind. It can train your mind to get used to repetition, to work with drishti, to work with the ujjayi breath, and just stay completely concentrated. So don't think of it as, you need more variety, you need more like different classes. What you need to do is actually practice with the same sequence, and then prevent your mind from wandering or going into any of these typical problems, and stay on the mat for as long as you can. And if you can come to the group classes, then I'll be able to actually help you refine your practice. And this is how, with guidance, you can actually grow from just preparing your mind and getting it ready for the practice into learning the sequence, into learning the names of the positions, how to get in and how to get out, and so on. Step number 3. This is to build an independent container. And this is like kind of so unique to the Ashtanga method, because the goal is actually to empower you. It's not for me to always be there to guide you, or always like you being reliant on me to be there so that you practice. So the step 3 is about building the confidence to roll out your mat and just practice on your own. And you should be able to practice even if you're traveling, even if life is busy. No matter what's happening around you, you should be able to do a practice from memory by yourself. And this is called the Mysore style practice, because traditionally in Mysore, this style of Ashtanga was taught just one-on-one, where the teacher was giving individualized feedback to a student at their own pace, but it was within this group setting, so you didn't feel like you're all alone. And the group energy kind of creates this conducive environment for you, but you go at your own pace. And you, on any given day, maybe one day you have low energy, so you decide I'm only going to do like a few sun salutations and then you can leave. And if you can bring that same kind of I can practice on my own to your home practice, which means first you start to practice under the guidance of a teacher with my kind of feedback and the group community support, then you'll be able to do it also on the other days at home. So this step, or step 3, is just about not relying entirely on guided classes, but slowly building that independent container. And as you can see, this little pinwheel that I've created, from the guided classes, you've got to get some kind of like one-on-one feedback in order for you to be able to practice on your own, which means like I can't just do that in a group class when I'm just guiding a whole bunch of people, because often, everyone's going at a different pace and I'm trying to keep the pace of the class. But if you come to a Mysore class, it's almost like a one-on-one class, but in a group setting. So this is what really truly builds a self-practice, true consistency, and the kind of confidence and self-trust that you'll get from doing Mysore practice is nothing like what you'll get in any guided class. And like I said earlier, there's never going to be a guided class that's going to be absolutely perfect for you. And I always recommend that you try your best to get to step 3 and build this independent container as quickly as possible, because then your body just flows through the positions, and this frees your mind to stay completely present in the poses instead of like worrying about the names of the poses, what comes next. So learn it through memory, and then keep repeating the same sequence over and over again. And then, as you'll see, this works like a cycle. If you can establish this cycle, then you'll build an independent container, and then it'll become like a strong, sustainable habit that won't shake if, one thing comes into your life, one variable in your life changes. But of course, there are tons of problems and things that come up for us when we try to establish a Mysore style practice. And the first one is just the sense of confidence. We think, oh my God, I can't do it alone. Like, I need to be shown what to do. Every time I've been to a yoga class, someone has been in the front of the mat and they're telling me what to do and I'm just copying it. What if I get it wrong? What if I injure myself? What if I push myself too far? And I think like this dependence it's not your fault at all. The whole yoga world makes you dependent on a teacher. But what I need you to recognize is that you always have to have this feedback loop. Even though like you're practicing alone, it's never that you're completely alone. I'm always going to be there to guide you, to help you, to be there and say, okay, this is where you're going wrong. You've missed a pose. Maybe, you can push yourself or you're pushing yourself too much. But what I want you to recognize is that an independent practice is such a huge part of this journey, and to not ignore that at all. When you come up with this second problem of just, oh my gosh, like how can I remember the sequence? What if I forget what's next? Then I'm going to like look around and see what everyone else is doing, and then that's going to distract me further. That's why we have these printable sequence charts that will aid you in actually developing this independent practice. Now, if you went to any other shala, Mysore shala in the world, they don't necessarily give you these charts, or they don't, even if they did give you a chart, there'll be one chart in the corner of the room, and it'll be the full primary sequence. And if you're an absolute beginner, you'll have no idea, like in those small little things, like what to look at or what to do. So that's why I think it's important to print out those charts and keep them with you, because they aid in that like clear progression of poses. And when you learn one sequence at a time, you won't think, oh, what's next? Do I need to do something else? Do I need to like go for a vinyasa class or do something else? You'll just be focused on that scope that you've set for yourself on that given day. The next one is self-doubt and validation, which again, if you're practicing alone at home, you might think, oh my gosh, am I doing all of this stuff right? I've been practicing for so long and I still don't know, if this is exactly the right way to do it. When you actually don't look for how the posture looks in another person's body or externally, you start to rely on your own breath and your internal sensation to guide you. And this is where the real practice starts in step 3, is when you begin to build self-trust and you establish that conversation with your body. You can practice without the noise of loud music, of other people, of all these other things that distract you, and you can use your own breath as a guide. So it's a really important step to reach, and also it'll help you feel less like, unsure of yourself generally. So definitely do Mysore style practice. Number 4 is just like feeling bored or feeling distracted, feeling like, if I have to practice entirely on my own and like, I'm practicing at home, I'm sure like someone will come in through the door, or like my dog will bark, or my maid will need me, and I just need to like, I'll get up, roll up my mat and go. I think if you look at the Ashtanga practice as a householder's practice, let's say you've got to go pick up your kid like at 4 o'clock and you've only got 15 minutes to show up to a Mysore class. Show up for those 15 minutes, do your Surya Namaskars, log off and leave. Most classes in the Western world have a fixed start time and a fixed end time, and like you're forced to do what the rest of the class is doing. But actually it's going to build discipline for you to show up more consistently. And if you have lower stakes and no like particular set time that you have to be there, it's going to make you more consistent, it's going to make you more disciplined. And if you do this correctly, you'll see it as something that you can fit into your busy schedule rather than something that, you know, that takes you out of your schedule. Finally, last one is that you feel overwhelmed by remembering all the multiple aspects simultaneously, because obviously even when you see a sequence chart, it's not just the poses, it's the vinyasas, it's learning the breath. But I think this is what actually helps you glue your mind. It frees your mind from focusing on all the other things that come up, and rather, if you have to tell yourself what's next, you're not going to have the space and time to actually like think about whatever's for dinner, because you'll have to guide yourself. And it's like cooking without a recipe, you know. When you have to cook without a recipe, you have to remember what's next through memory, and you have to be on it. You can't just leave the stuff and walk away. And it's very much like that. Your cognitive load will reduce over time, because you'll know, okay, these are the things that I have to remember. I just have to do this one sequence. Once I'm done, I'm done. And this frees the mind to actually shift inwards and use the practice as this container, so that the mind can then, you know, regulate and come back into this steady one-pointed focus. So these are all the problems that can arise, and hopefully some of these solutions give you some ideas of what you can do if you feel kind of low on motivation or feel like you're doubting yourself. If you can do this alone, start with 10 sun salutations and log off. Next week, come back to 15 sun salutations, log off. So it doesn't have to be something that you do one time. Just remember to build it slowly, and don't shy away from coming to these classes, because anyone can do this. All they have to have is a body and a willingness. And if they have a body and willingness, then they can do Mysore style practice. And obviously I'm there to guide you, so don't stress at all. Step number 4, resolving the stuck points and moving forward. Now, a lot of us just believe that if we can't do a pose, then we can't do the pose. And if we can do the pose, then we can do the pose. But inevitably, when you practice, when you start your practice, you've prepared your mind, then you've actually like understood the foundations, and you practice with guidance, you practice without guidance. There'll always be some poses that your body just doesn't do, you know, like it can't do some things. And it's in our best interest to identify these obstacles, look for solutions to these obstacles, and get the feedback or the support that we need to move past these stuck points. Because otherwise we'll hit a plateau and we'll say, oh, this practice is just mundane. I don't really feel like, you know, I can do all these advanced shapes. I've reached a point where I can do these poses, and then I mean, this is it. I can't do much more. So it's natural to give up. It's natural to feel frustrated at this point. But remember, we're trying to make that water flow through so that we can actually use it. And if we don't resolve these stuck points, and if we don't see this as one of those places where the water is not flowing in whatever pose or in whatever like series of poses that you can't do, maybe it's half primary to full primary that you just feel like, oh, this is not going to come for me. It's really it's your chance to say, what can this teach me? What can this teach me about me, about what I'm resisting, about what I'm not looking at? And through the community, through like asking your teacher and using the targeted drills, hopefully that'll help you like address those issues, look at those issues head on, resolve those stuck points, and keep moving, keep practicing. So if you don't get guidance at this point, there's no way you can see outside of yourself to see how you can get out. So don't just stay quiet, ask questions, use the drills, and watch the workshops, because this is what will help you get past that stuck point. Awesome. Now let's look at some of the problems that arise and some of the solutions that I have for you. The first one is just to have a fixed mindset. Now, if you come in with a fixed mindset that just says, I can't do it because, you know, I've got bad genes, or, you know, I'm making such slow progress. It's been 6 months since I've started the program and I'm just not moving ahead. Maybe I should give up. I feel completely discouraged and I'm doing this all alone. Then I want you to come to the Connect and Cure sessions to break down these complex poses into manageable, shorter chunks so that you can see, like inside the vinyasa count, where am I actually stuck? Instead of doing the poses and just feeling stuck, to step outside, to look outside, like when you're in the shape, and see what's happening in the shape through targeted drills or through like these kinds of 1 hour workshops where we address singular asanas. That's how you can actually get over that discouragement that you feel, because then you'll feel like, oh wait, there's something I can do about it. There's something I can do to resolve this and move forward. And the second thing that comes up is impatience. It's nice to kind of do a whole class if we have the time, but some days we should almost humble ourselves and say like a 15-minute, 20-minute, 10-minute practice is still a practice, So when you're doing the drills, you shouldn't feel like, oh, it's not yoga, it's just I want to do a full class. You need to like see this as solving your problem. It's absolutely integral to actually moving ahead in your practice. So don't be impatient, don't skip out the drills. Actually understand why this pose is challenging for you specifically. Understand if there's an anatomical imbalance or there's something that's mentally blocking you from doing the position. And then see what drills you can do to repeat and address those stuck points. Now, without resolving the stuck points, it's very easy to just be like, okay, like there's some things I can do, there's some things I can't do, and accept it as that's who you are. There's always room for improvement, whether it's deepening the breath or finding like an inch of space. And the more you see that, the more it'll become an internalized practice rather than an externalized performance. So this is the last one, which is what I wanted to go through, which is just like you have to reframe getting stuck as this opportunity for you to deeply learn about yourself. It's not a failure that you can't do Uttita Hasta Padangushtasana and balance. It's very much just, what is this pose showing me? And if you keep avoiding like the hard things and do only things that come easy to you, then you're actually resisting the deeper work of yoga. And you can treat it like an exercise. You'll still get more toned, you'll still get all those benefits, but it may not translate really deeply. And like I said, the water may not flow through all the way until you can use it. So ask a lot of questions. Don't think you're going to look stupid. We try our best to create like a safe space to ask questions, even within the live classes or these types of things. So everyone struggles with something. I struggle. I'm sure every single person struggles. So don't feel like, if you have a question or you're not able to do something, that it's a problem and that you should just like be like, oh, that's my body, or I'm just old, or something like that. Just try your best to use the resources that you have, whether it's using the manual or the drill breakdowns or asking me a question, and just resolve this and then move forward to step number 5. So just to recap, we looked at building the foundation, like steadying the mind before we practice. We practice with a little bit of guidance. Then we practice without guidance, just on our own. Then we worked on how to resolve the stuck points. And finally, we come to step 5, where we refine our inner artistry. So once you've built this practice and you have the tools to navigate challenges, now it's time to go a little bit deeper. And this step is about moving beyond just unlocking physical shapes to rather seeing this as an internal experience. And this is where the true yoga starts, because when we do our private sessions, I'm sure if you've been in a private session with me, you know that it's more like a therapy session rather than just like, okay, let's give you some drills and some feedback on your positions. It's very much about how you can make subtle corrections to your shapes and then try and see that emotional correlate, or try and see how that has both mental and physical shifts. And when you look at it as an internal thing rather than just, some shape that you're trying to unlock, it becomes much more about coming to the practice with presence each day rather than trying to do like a performance for either the camera or for someone else who's watching, or even for your own self that's like so incentivized to accomplish more, to do more, to be perfect. So we have to see at least the yoga practice as something where we can tend to our internal processes and be completely present with ourselves and what's coming up, rather than what we have to do as an external performance. So from step 1 to step 4, you might be able to like get here really fast, but step 5 is usually where sometimes it feels like it slows down, because this is a much more subtle thing, right? It's much more like, it's much harder to access a calm mind through the shapes than it is to do the shapes well. So this is where the work really starts, in terms of just taking it from I'm accomplishing asanas to I'm really like developing the tools within myself to go deeper on this journey, to navigate whatever resistance is coming up. And that's where you'll feel more calm. You'll feel like, oh, I'm actually getting calmer through this practice, rather than just getting fitter, stronger, and more like getting more asanas. And this is what will help you stay inspired for the long haul, is to see how can this become more internalized rather than externalized. And of course, we're going to have a ton of problems that arise when we try to do this, when we even broach the subject of going deeper. And the first one is perfectionism. It's almost like, if you can't do a position, you say, oh, I still can't do it. I've been practicing this for 1 year and I still can't do it. But other people, who've been practicing for 6 months, they can do it. How come, I can't master this position? And again, this is going back into just looking at it from an external performance way, instead of this is if I broke this down completely into just its individual parts, how can I use targeted, actionable feedback that my teacher gives me to incrementally work on it, instead of comparing myself to someone else or wanting to do more so quickly that it overwhelms my mind. So just remember, one of the first things that comes up when you try to go deeper and make this an internalized practice is that you will feel this sense of perfectionism, because your mind will want to look at the external shape. But I want you to look at it as much more like an internal thing, a thing that's constantly changing. So the second thing that comes up is just remembering all the things that your teacher tells you while you're practicing. Sometimes it's a lot all at once, and it's not just look at your finger or engage your thigh. It's also like, how is your attitude to the shape? And then that overwhelms you, because then you're like, oh my gosh, now I'm thinking about all the times that I'm like this. So I want you to shift the emphasis from external aesthetics of how the shape looks, from the form of the shape into the function of the shape. Like, what is it actually giving me? What subtle control am I actually having over the shape? And that's where you get empowerment in this inner artistry. Next one is when you reach that point where, you've finished Mysore practice. I mean, not finished, but you're practicing Mysore style practice. You've been able to practice Mysore style practice. But then at some point, we just do what we're comfortable with, because, we're in charge now, and we never try the advanced poses. We never actually push ourselves to that edge of what we can do, because of course, we're scared to injure ourselves. We're scared to try advanced poses at home, online. And I think when you begin to use your breath as a guide, and also trust your teacher as someone who can see how far you can go, then you'll gradually build the confidence to attempt these advanced poses that were once like dream positions. But then you'll start to do it off the wall. You'll be able to do it in the middle of the room. And over time, you'll see this is what the self-practice gives you, is not only like being able to practice on your own, but also being able to advance on your own. And of course, it takes a little bit of guidance initially, but if you don't see it as I need to get the shape, rather as how can I gradually build the confidence within myself to broach the shape, then over time, it's either going to come or it's not going to come, and that's fine, because at least you're practicing with the foundations. And finally, it's these limiting beliefs that stop us. We see the whole world through our beliefs. It's almost like we filter our reality through the beliefs that we hold. And a lot of us have this belief that my body is just not built for Ashtanga. And I try my best, at least within the primary sequence, to give as many modifications as possible for every single shape, every single person with disability. So it doesn't feel like, you need to accomplish what another person is accomplishing, but you can celebrate your own progress from where you were to where you are now. And this practice is meant to be adapted. Back in Mysore, when Patabi Joyce and even BK Sayangar were giving out these positions, they never had they never had these ideas that everyone should be doing the full practice 4 series, nothing like that. It was much more for your body, for your specific needs, how can we adapt the poses to suit your needs? So refining inner artistry becomes much less about completing sequences and much more about overcoming self-limiting beliefs by giving yourself an appropriate adaptation instead of working towards the fixed version of the pose that someone else can do. And the final one is overthinking all the feedback that you get, because it can feel like a burden to listen to all the stuff that's wrong with you that you have to correct. And you'll feel like, oh my gosh, like I'm not really making much progress in the last 6 months. I haven't unlocked any new shapes. I haven't gotten any new asanas. But if you view this as a lifelong thing, it's you're shaping this sculpture from the inside, and you view it as a project rather than just something that you have to accomplish or fix or perfect, then you'll start to see this as, wow, the sculpture that I'm building is inside. It's not something that's outside. It's not like a set in stone thing that I have something to show for, but it's much more like internally I'm chipping away at some sculpture. And I hope that like visual helps as step number 5, just being about bringing it inwards rather than concentrating on the external pose, and slowly focusing on that inner refinement as well. Last 2 steps, we're almost there. Step number 6 is to sustain this uninterrupted calm. So this is where the magic really happens. I know I said that for almost every single step, but this is where it's not like something that you need to do. It's part of your identity. So you are a person that practices yoga. You can call yourself a yogi or not, but it's no longer like a negotiable thing. If you don't practice, you're less productive, you're less happy, you're less like healthy in your body. And so it's about leveraging this consistency to create this uninterrupted calm that then anchors your daily life. And a lot of people, when they stay just stuck on the asana level, can't quite see this as a way to build that mental stillness, to actually be calm through the practice. So first thing I would suggest is increase your frequency. So the traditional practice requires us to practice 6 times a week, but those 6 times a week have to be like not monotonous practices, but practice that it feels like a medicine rather than a punishment. It shouldn't be rigid. It should be like, this is the thing that supports me in my life. And only if you have flexibility around it are you going to be able to sustain it for a long time. And the second thing is that at this point, when it becomes a part of your life, it becomes this predictable container for your mind. So repetition, although we hate it for people who have busy minds, it's almost like the medicine that we need, and the predictable sequence becomes this anchor even if life feels chaotic. And finally, you'll move from feeling like you have to do yoga to actually just wanting that same sense of peace and clarity that it brings you. So because of the consistency of experience that you've been able to give yourself through the practice over a long enough time, your mind will almost just quieten down, and every time you step on the mat, your body will take over, go through these poses, and at the end you'll feel like you're in a completely different shape. Now, of course, there's lots of problems that arise and corresponding solutions that I've come up with. And the first one is, when you do this over a long period of time, you'll start to feel bored. You'll start to feel like this is monotonous. And I expect this to happen anywhere between 1 to 2 years of you practicing. And then the routine feels like, there's not that much to add. There's not that many new things I can do, and it loses its spark, and you just feel like it's boring. But I think we need to have this view of Ashtanga as not a rigid framework, not as a restrictive like set sequence of postures that you have to do 6 days a week, but rather like it's a flexible framework for self-discovery. On one day, you don't have to do everything. On another day, and every day is different because you're approaching the practice from a different state of mind. One day you could have more energy, the other day you could have like very little energy. So just remember, don't think of it as this rigid thing that you have to do. And if you don't practice a single day and you feel bad about yourself, that's when you're thinking of it too dogmatically, and you need to kind of relax a bit, chill out a bit. And that self-judgment that comes from missing a day means I'm a failure. You have to see this practice as a compassionate container that you're holding for yourself, not as this rigid rule that you have to practice every day, otherwise something will happen or everything will go wrong. There's going to be days when you miss practice. There's going to be weeks when, like something bad happens in your life and you're not able to practice. So you've got to reframe discipline as a compassionate container that's always available to you, that you can always step into, and like be kind to yourself. Missing a day does not mean you're a failure. The next one is distraction and consistency. So at this point, when we've actually seen, okay, yoga is working, I've made lots of progress, then like life obviously moves in a way that there's more things that get piled on top of us, and then it doesn't become like a habit that we've prioritized. we start to miss days, or there's internal resistance that comes because we've finished primary series, for example. And then like when you finish primary series, you feel accomplished, so you're like, oh, I don't have to do full primary series every time. And then your consistency will drop because you feel like, oh, I've achieved this kind of like milestone that I always wanted to achieve. That's when you've got to be more careful that you don't dip in consistency, because we need to recognize that the changes that you're experiencing are far more, the internal changes that you're experiencing are far more profound than the physical results of finishing primary or doing poses that you once weren't able to do. So highlight to yourself those subtle shifts that are happening. And the next one is impatience for results. So if you're not feeling any calmer, you're still angry, you still get irritable, you're still feeling stressed, and you're still questioning if this class, this practice, this entire thing works, then remember that you can't tell me that you've been practicing for 1 or 2 years and say it's not working. It's a training, which means like the more you repeat, the more you're going closer and closer towards that second Yoga Sutra that we talked about. So repetition is medicine for a mind that feels like disturbed, that isn't calm, that isn't like, that gets irritable really easily. So keep reinforcing to yourself that repetition is how your mind is going to learn how to focus and create stillness. From the place of focus and stillness, there's less likelihood of you getting agitated or angry or whatever. So just think of this as a mind training rather than just like, something that you have to get through. The next one is that you start to feel aches and pains in your body, and maybe like, you feel sore because you pushed yourself too much, and then you need a few days to recover. And this happens to a lot of us because when we practice consistently 4-5 times a week, our body will start to get some aches or pains. It's a natural part of the process, but you should kind of reduce your intensity on some days, prioritize your rest days and do things to recover on those days, and adapt. You don't have to say like Monday I need to do full primary, Tuesday I need to do, don't do that. Look at it on a daily basis and say, how do I feel? Like, can I do more? Can I do less? But obviously you're at stage 6 by this point, so you know the sequence, you've been able to practice on your own, and you've done all of that previous work of getting it integrated, and this is where you have that ability to work within the structure, to know when you can push yourself and when you should like kind of hold back and not do as much. So this is kind of the important characteristics of step number 6, where people kind of fall off because then they don't see many cool results anymore, and they're like, oh, this is boring, let me just give up, let me go to the gym again, or let me go do Zumba or something else, because it doesn't feel anymore like this cool thing that was helping you feel calmer. It becomes like an obligation, like something that I'm forced to do because this tyrant inside my head is going to flagellate me if I don't do my practice. So this is why we're here, this community, this supportive space to help you feel like, like if there's times when you don't feel like practicing, we're still here to be like, oh yeah, we're here for you, even if you're going through something difficult, even if you're, in a place where you have lots of energy. That's why you need supporting structures to hold you accountable for a long, long period of time before you can see this as, okay, I can do this for 40-50 years and not feel bored with it. Final step, we're here, is to witness the ripple effects both internally and externally. So the final step, this last bit of the pipe, where we've actually built the foundation for our mind, we've learned how to practice using guidance, we've learned how to practice Mysore style, we've unlocked all the stuff that's blocking us, we've noticed this inner artistry, looking at it from the inside, then we've built this sense of like, unshakable container for the mind, so you're not getting interrupted even when life goes up and down. And finally, it's to actually log and see how is my practice helping me, or what can I do using my practice through the rest of the day. Now, for me, this is basically like journaling after my practice, and all the videos I make, all this stuff that I create is just from that 20 minutes after my Shavasana when I get up and I write. So this is for me what I mean by witnessing the ripple effects. But it's about recognizing that the work that you do on the mat doesn't stay on the mat. The calm, the focus, the resilience, all that stuff that you've managed to carefully cultivate, it slowly begins to ripple into every area of your life. And you'll notice, like, even, when you're just sitting in your desk and you're just chilling, you feel like you can breathe more consciously, breathe more slowly. You have true presence and you can experience connections with your family and friends without feeling distracted and all over the place. You're like actually responding more instead of just reacting to whatever is triggering you. And there's this deep sense of confidence that's coming from being able to do such hard things on the mat, but also you can handle whatever life throws at you because you've practiced on the mat. And you can define what this means, but you'll start to redefine what stillness and progress means at this stage, because stillness and progress is something that you can access after you practice every single time. And by putting your mind through the same process every single time, you realize, oh, I don't have to go to a Vipassana retreat for 10 days and completely empty my mind. I can very much like do this as a waking, breathing meditation in my daily life. And the gaps between like feeling anxious and like getting calm and feeling still become like less and less. So every time you practice, there's a sense of like confidence and reassurance that you give yourself that becomes your new normal over time. But of course, there's things that happen and problems that arise when we get to stage 7. The first one is I don't have time for journaling because I need to get on with my day. I've already spent like an hour and a half. I would say like have your tea or like have your smoothie or whatever you're drinking and then just kind of write, optimize your time, use a voice note. Like there's no such thing as not being able to write down what insights you've gotten, because these days we've got apps that, basically take our voice when we're driving. But whatever I'm saying is just quick reflection after practice. The second one is feeling the sense of disconnection. So you don't really see this link between your mat and daily life because you're back to like shouting at your coworker by 11 a.m. You had the best, most amazing practice. You feel amazing. You've unlocked all these things in your body. But, by like 11 o'clock, you're back to feeling irritable. This is where you haven't made that connection between what is happening on the mat and what's happening in your real life. So this is where I'm going to be teaching you how to see these tiny little shifts in your real life as the actual transformation. That's when you change who you are and your life starts to change based on what you're doing on the mat. And of course, there's this translation failure between being super present on the mat and you can do Navasana for 5 breaths, but then, when your partner starts talking to you, you just switch off and you're like, I've heard this a million times. So basically, we need to realize that what is happening on the mat is a direct mirror for what's happening in our relationships, in our work relationships and our personal relationships. So to translate that presence that you have in Navasana when your core is burning into the conversations that you have with your partner, and to have that same sense of like quietness and like, ability to listen. We all struggle with this, but this is where it really matters. Next is skepticism and doubt, like still questioning all the foundations of the practice. And you need to reframe what mental stillness is in order to see what I'm saying. So it's not like, you're never going to be stress-free. It's almost like you need a certain degree of stress in order to function and do what you do in your daily life. But you need to reframe calm as a resilience and an ability to come back to your breath. Not that you're never going to be stressed or you're never going to be pulled out of your center. Is to take charge and to stay in that stage of, oh, I'm in control. I've got like the resilience that I've built through the practice to withstand this amount of stress. But basically it's about managing these expectations and reframing what calm means to you. Last 2, triggers and relapse. So this one is you say, oh, I'm calm, I'm completely like, I'm like a yogi, but then until I'm triggered, I go back and stay with my family. Until then, I'm like totally zen. But when I go back, then, like everything goes back to square one and I can't do my practice. I just become this child. And so what we need to do is recognize that just as like when we saw those stuck points in the practice, those were time to look them head on. In the same way, like whenever we get triggered in these positions, these are opportunities for us to grow, for us to look at it instead of like failure on our part as a human being. So think of this as a way in which it reveals to you all the weaknesses that you still have And because we have so many things to work through, this is why it's a lifelong journey, and you can't expect instant like benefits from practicing yoga to feeling calm, even though that's what all the marketing says. Don't buy it. And the last one is a need for others to confirm these internal changes. So this is kind of like, for other people to view you as spiritually evolved, or like that you've reached a certain stage of enlightenment. But actually, it's nothing to do with what another person thinks at all. It's much more about subjectively, how are you feeling in yourself, in your body, like in your being, not just like how you're feeling externally based on what other people perceive you as. And of course, this means that by step 7, you become the kind of person that lives yoga, that breathes yoga, that isn't just practicing yoga for 60 minutes in the day. So just to recap everything once, remember that this is your whole barrel of energy that you have, and in order to make it really force it through all these different parts of the pipe so it comes out as clean, drinkable water, or prana, whatever you want to call it, you have to be able to look at each of these sections and see what are the problems that are arising for me when I go into this stage. So stage 1, what are the problems that arise? How can I solve them? Stage 2, what are the problems that arise? And how can I solve them? All the way until stage 7, when you witness the ripple effects in your life, and you see this as an actually like worthwhile thing to do, rather than just something that your mom told you to do, or that's something that someone else said, oh yeah, yoga might help. So I hope this roadmap was useful to see how you can systematically train the mind through authentic Ashtanga Vinyasa. This isn't anything I invented. This has existed for lots of time. But what I've done is I've helped you kind of see that it's not that you're bad at yoga, it's just that you haven't noticed what are the individual variables or individual sections that you haven't made the water flow through yet, so that you actually take benefit out of it in your daily life. So I hope that after this workshop you can kind of look at it more holistically and see how to make the best out of the practice.